This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, welcome back to M237, back with another review. So I continue my run through of films based on real life serial killers, and this is another film based on a killer that I've already done, except this film's actually good. And, well, the first one I did wasn't too bad, all things considered, of other films I've done. But this is probably the best film about this killer, even though it doesn't show his crimes, it's more about the investigation, but it's still very well made. And once again, it's a made-for-TV movie. There's something about these true crime serial killer made-for-TV movies that are so good and better than most direct-to-video films or theatrical films. And actually, this killer doesn't really have a whole lot of movies based on him. There's the one I did, there's this one, and then there's a lot of novelty films that I have no interest in seeing. Of course, the killer is John Wayne Gacy, and this is this is the 1992 made-for-TV movie To Catch a Killer, which I think this has gone out of print. I bought this off eBay. I was worried if it was going to work because it's Region 4, but it played in my PS4 just fine. So yeah, aired in 1992. This stars Brian Dennehy as Gacy, which, I mean, he's known for Rambo First Blood, Tommy Boy's dad. He's been in a lot of things, and he's excellent as Gacy. He doesn't always look like him, but, you know, when he gets that Brian Dennehy great big grin, he smiles kind of the way that Gacy does. Actually, that's him as Pogo there. And yeah, his clown makeup and costume design is different, but this movie's fairly accurate. I mean, you look at all the differences from reality, there's not that many, and they're usually small details. It is kind of a painstaking, almost recreation of Joseph Kosinczak's ruthless investigation into catching Gacy at the end of December in 1978, starting from December 12th up on through after Christmas. And Dennehy might not be in it that much, especially in part one, because it's 2.5 episodes or films, so it's about 3 hours. But it was directed by Eric Till, written by Judd Kinberg, and you also have appearances by Meg Foster, who was in Tremors, Margot Kidder, of course, from Amityville Horror, Superman movies. They have very bit roles, but you remember them. Michael Riley plays Lieutenant Detective Kosinczak, and at times he looks like Jason Sudeikis with the mustache from that Ted Lasso show that he does, but he does a really good job as well. And it's just a very well-made TV movie. At times it feels like an early 90s, you know, crime drama, like one that could have been released in theaters. But at other times it does feel like a TV movie. Music by Paul Zaza. I guess it was a co-production between Canada and the US. It originally aired on Fox, actually, May 15th, 1992, just 2 years shy of Gacy's execution date, which was May 10th of 94. Production location, Toronto. Who else? Which Margot Kidder plays Rachel Grayson. Her character, I'm not entirely sure, because it has something to do with how a psychic was involved with the investigation, which I've read and heard things about. It's kind of inflated in this. Meg Foster plays city attorney Linda Carlson. And I didn't recognize anybody else, but it opens up with almost any other serial killer film about how, some of it's fictionalized, names and events have been changed, uh, which it does, but everything surrounding the names, for the most part, is pretty accurate. I mean, it does kind of show the investigation to be a little bit more ruthless than it might have been. The cat and mouse game kind of being more antagonistic than it might have been, at least on Gacy's part. Because there were 2 search warrants, and the film shows that it was like pulling teeth to get that second warrant, when in reality it really wasn't that difficult. But I'm just reading up what this says. Apparently, when Brian Dennehy goes back to Chicago, he's always asked about this role, because I guess he's been closely associated with playing Gacy, which isn't hard to do, because, I mean, the only other films you get is, like, the one from 2003, which I reviewed, which isn't great. I mean, that's one if you want to see him commit crimes, but even then, it doesn't show him committing that many murders. And I mean, this film opens up on December. It doesn't say it. There's actually no dates throughout this film, but the disappearance of Robert Peast, or in the film Chris Gand, on December 11th of 78, and then the next day on the 12th, him being reported missing, and then Kozenczak getting involved, and then everything leading up to Gacy's arrest. That's what the film is. I kind of thought it was going to be structured similar to how a lot of documentaries are. Like, maybe the first part was going to be the investigation, and then, like, part 2 was going to be him being interrogated, and then us kind of getting his story. It didn't do that. All 3 hours is the investigation itself, which is fine. But, like other movies that do this, like the Lou Diamond Phillips Night Stalker film, which I just reviewed, or Extremely Wicked with Zac Efron, very well-made films that don't really show the crimes, but when they show something that looks like it, it's so well done, and the actor is so good that you kind of can't help but think, why didn't we get more of this? Why didn't we actually see? But, again, this is one of those movies that's going to separate the surface-level true crime fans that just want to see, essentially, a real-life slasher film, and the ones that actually want to, learn what happened and, learn more about serial killers, aside from their crimes, like the investigation. But when there are films like Extremely Wicked, which is all about Ted Bundy's trials and escapes, but then at the end where you get that one shot with him, getting one victim and dragging her in the woods, you kind of can't help but think, it was so well done, the actor's so good. I do kind of wish that there was more, flashbacks to the murders, but it's still a very well-made film. Now, everything I have on Gacy, numerous documentaries. The only actual book I have specifically on him is Terry Sullivan's Killer Clown. There are numerous other books. There's Boys Enter the House, which I think is more just about the victims and who they were before they entered Gacy's house. That's a book I'd like to get. There's one called Defending a Monster, which I think is by or about his attorney. And then there's just numerous other biographical books. But then I have more, like 24 encyclopedic books like these. I just pulled this one because he's on the cover of it. So, not as much as some other killers that I have on Gacy. But I would say Gacy is another, for lack of a better term, a top 10 killer for me as far as, loving to learn about how fascinating he is. And for me, the appeal is I'm really interested in serial killers that have that facade of, a married family man, more of a suburban area, pillar of the community, widely respected, which this movie does play on, and how they're able to get away with it for so long. Either so long or amass such a huge body count in a relatively short amount of time without being noticed. Now, I guess real quick, John Wayne Gacy, known as the Killer Clown, that's really just because, he would dress up as a clown, pogo or patches, depending on his personality, for his the children of his political friends or kids in the hospital or birthday parties. He would do clown performances, but it wasn't like he donned a clown costume and went out and lurked and stalked victims. Although it's been said and disputed that he might have worn the grease paint or the outfit while torturing and assaulting his victims once they're already in his house. So, but that's something really only Gacy would know. Killed 33 young men and boys between 1972 and December 11th of 1978. And convicted of all 33. I think 4 or 5 are still unidentified. 29 were found all under his property in some capacity. Like 26 were found under his crawl space. I think 2 under his recreational area, 1 under the garage. I think 1 under the kitchen or the backyard. That equals 29. 29 total, and then 4 others were found in or near the Des Plaines River later that June. They had to wait for the ice to thaw. And then he was executed May 10th of 1994. And so, yeah, basic cliff notes. There's a ton that you can find on him, but so the movie opens up with Chris Gand or Robert Peast or Chris Gand going into the pharmacy, get the photos developed, but he also mentioned he's going to talk to this contractor about a potential job. Happens to be John Wayne Gacy for PDL contractors. In real life, it was PDM, painting, decorating, and maintenance. And he was never seen again. And Robert Peast ended up being his final victim. But the next day on the 12th, that was when Kozensak gets involved, and they immediately start looking into Gacy, and it was the lengthy investigation. Now, there are many things it gets right. There are some things it gets wrong. The names that it changes that I noticed was they do learn about this one victim through his ex-wife. He was married twice. No mention of his first wife in the late 60s. But then he married this other woman who had 2 daughters, and they were married during his killing spree. Ended up being divorced by 75. She has a short scene, and that's when she mentions this victim, Mitkovich. I think that's based on John Butkovich, which was an employee of his. They had a falling out over payment. I'm guessing that's who he's based on. It also shows on their initial search of his house, they find a class ring belonging to someone named Trask, which, judging that the actual initials on the ring are JAS, I think it's supposed to be based on John Allen Cizik. But there are a lot of accuracies. There were stolen items like a TV, a Motorola TV, which uh, Trask in the film. His mother is able to give the manual to so they can link the serial numbers, which the film shows. Uh, they do find the photo receipt in the trash can in the kitchen, which is what happened in real life. And then, you know, a bunch of gay porn magazines, handcuffs. It does show that they find his rack, which they call a board, which is just a board with handcuffs that leaves you stuck like this. So that's all stuff they did find upon that first search warrant. The foreman of PDL in the film is a guy named Ted Koslow. I think he's a combination of different people, being Michael Rossi and David Cram. They weren't victims, but they worked for Gacy. They both lived with him for a period. Rossi was known to dress up as Patches sometimes for clown shows, and Cram actually dug holes in the crawl space, being told it was for drainage pipes, which in the film the Costello character says he did, so that's also accurate. It does show how at one point Gacy invited some of these surveillance cops in for a drink. In real life, I think it was mostly meals, dinner, but one of them picks up a scent that's awful that he can't place. And then later on, he realizes, I've smelt that in the morgue before. Uh, that is a thing that happened in real life. And then the whole thing with the psychic, which is the character that Margot Kidder plays. I've come across stuff about a psychic being contacted. In the film, they make it seem like it's a last-ditch effort, but let's try a psychic. But where it's inflated is that everything the psychic says is correct. So I think that's a bit exaggerated. But some other things that they get right is they learn about his assault charges in Waterloo, Iowa, including his sex crimes against a teenage boy, including sodomy. Um, the trapdoor that goes to his crawl space is at the closet. The set design or whatever location they found for 8213 Summerdale Avenue looks very much like his house, both inside and out. So I commend the production design or the location scout for finding this house. Which also reminds me, a couple other films about Gacy that I have no interest in seeing is, I think it's called 8213 Gacy's House, which I think is like a paranormal activity novelty film. There's also Dahmer vs. Gacy, a novelty film I have no interest in seeing. Then there's one called Dear Mr. Gacy that I think is a true story about someone writing to him in prison, trying to get him to open up about stuff. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know if I'm going to do that. But, and there's only one scene with him in clown makeup and clown costume, and that's this one here, which it shows him doing a clown party at a hospital, which he goes over to the two surveillance cops and Kozensak saying he needs handcuffs for this one trick. And actually this very frame here, he says, "Oh, detective, don't you know clowns can get away with murder?" That is something he said to police, but he said it in his house when he invited them in. They did take his cars, his personal Oldsmobile, his PDM van and work cars. It does show that the canine German Shepherd was in the death position when it sniffed his Oldsmobile. that did happen. But in the movie, he's doing it to the trunk, whereas in real life, he did it, I think, to the passenger seat. Um, Gacy was said that did tell police that he was going to sue them for $750,000 because of their search warrants, and he thought everything they were doing was bogus. The way Gacy's portrayed in this is it's sort of the macho. Do you know who you're messing with? Do you know how important I am to this community? Persona that Gacy put out, but I have read some conflicting things saying that he was like that to law enforcement all the time. But I also read that towards the end he was kind of meek and cordial and very, what's the word? Easygoing with law enforcement. Which it does show a scene where he's inviting them over for drinks, but then he gets really pissed. Which actually in the film they kind of invite themselves, but he's okay with it. Then he realizes what they're doing. They're snooping around. The ring that they find, which in the film is a boy named Trask. It was John Allen Cizik in real life, if I pronounce that correctly. It was shown that he owned a red Honda hatchback, which he was trying to sell. And then the cops found that the character Coslow had been driving it around, which is true. Gacy did take it and sell it to one of his employees. Also, the whole thing with the TV belonged to the same kid, that his mother was able to help confirm it. It was Gacy's ex-wife that mentioned Butkovich's disappearance, or that she got a phone call from his parents. But again, it's Butkovich in the film. They do interrogate Koslow, where he says, he dug trenches. I can't remember which one between Cram and Rossi, or if it was both. Gacy, it does show him doing the handcuff trick to a boy named Billy. He doesn't kill him because he's still under surveillance. But that's that scene, like I mentioned earlier, where I was like, he's so good in this role, and just, the room looks just like his recreation room. And the handcuff trick was sort of his number one MO for overpowering his victims. Then I couldn't help but think, I wish at least half of this movie was his killing spree, just because it's portrayed so well in that one scene. And even though especially if you know the Gacy story, the character Billy's going to get away, he's not going to get killed. But the way it's built up and the way it's done is still quite suspenseful. So that's a testament to how well made the film is. They are able to link the receipt to Piest, the day of his disappearance. It does show towards the end Gacy going to his lawyer's office, drunk, sweaty, stumbling, disheveled. We don't see him. He goes in, but we don't hear his confession, which is when he says he's been bad, he's done bad things. And then he sleeps there for the night. But it does show the lawyer coming out to the surveillance cop saying, don't let him get away. Assuming he's told him some stuff. And then there was a high-speed chase going on after he left his lawyer's office, simultaneously with the second search warrant, or the second warranted search being executed. It shows that, which is when they find the bodies at the crawl space. Yeah. But some of the differences, these are all in the notes that I took. This movie shows that apparently, according to this, it was really hard to get extra cops to come on to the case. Where I guess in real life it was not that difficult. The movie makes it look like it was incredibly difficult to get the second search warrant, even with all the evidence that they had. In real life, it was not not that difficult at all. Again, the whole thing with the psychic, and again, I've read stuff about a psychic being involved, but it's highly exaggerated. I think in real life, they either knew that he had been arrested in 1967, 7, 8, but they didn't really know the extent of it in real life. Whereas in the film, it shows that they know exactly he served 18 months for sodomy, which he did. But it was actually during the trial that he admitted to picking up male prostitutes, tying them up, and then threatening to tell their parents. It shows dogs continuing to sniff around the river during the winter months. I think everything was halted until the spring. Then they went back, and that's when they found the 4 remaining bodies. There's a scene where a cop drops some of the victims' names to Gacy in a bar. I don't think that ever happened. There was a scene towards the end where Gacy's cruising by the Greyhound bus station and tries to pick up another young man, but then surveillance cops pull up. As soon as the Robert Peast investigation was going on, Gacy pretty much ceased everything. He wasn't like Bundy, where he would try to get away with as much as he could. And at the end, it mentioned something about how Kozenczak's methods and tactics are now protocol for how to catch a serial killer. That's not entirely true, unless maybe it's limited to like the Des Plaines, Chicago area. But I haven't read anything about him solely being credited with, coming up with the ways of how to catch a serial killer. But yeah, then it just ends with voiceover about how, he killed at least 33 confirmed young men and boys. 29 of them are found under his house in various places. 26 in the crawl space. True. And he's awaiting death row, which at the time this was made, he was still waiting, making this the only Gacy film to come out during his lifetime. And yeah, that's To Catch a Killer. Very well made, very well acted. One of the better made-for-TV films that I've seen. I'd probably say, as far as the movie goes, it was better than Hunt for the BTK Killer. I might say it was a better movie than The Deliberate Stranger. I'm more drawn to the Bundy story by default, so maybe that's why I like that one more. But if I did have any complaints, is that maybe Brian Dennehy didn't have enough screen time. But even with the screen time he has, he definitely makes the most of it. I mean, he's known for playing Gacy. Part 2, he's definitely in it more, and you do kind of see his descent, so that by the end of the film, when he's just a sweaty, drunken mess, the paranoia and everything is getting to him. It shows that. I did like that. It does feel more like a Law and Order procedural kind of film. Excuse me. It's more like a Law and Order procedural than it is, oh, this is the life of John Wayne Gacy, which is perfectly fine as long as it's more accurate than fictional. Then I'm okay with it. I mean, serial killers has been my biggest passion for almost 20 years at this point. So, to me, it doesn't just have to be the murders. It can be the investigation, or, I mean, you look at a couple of the Bundy films. There's a film just about his confessions. There's 2 films just about him giving his insight to who Green River could be. I love anything that has to do with serial killers. And supposedly, I heard that the creator or showrunner of the Dahmer Netflix series plans on doing the same kind of treatment for two more killers. I'm assuming one of them is going to be Gacy because of those scenes that we got in Dahmer with Gacy. I would love that. I love the treatment that Dahmer got in the Netflix series. By treatment, I mean the story, how in-depth and accurate, how well-made, shot, and acted it was. If they do that with Gacy, I'm on board for that. I forgot to mention when I went through all that stuff, I have seen the John Wayne Gacy tapes, which pisses me off because it's Netflix, so we're not going to get a DVD. There is the Devil in Disguise documentary on Peacock, which is really good. But yeah, as far as films go, you're probably not going to get a better Gacy film than this. Brian Dennehy, awesome. I really do like that one scene with Billy when he's doing the handcuff trick. You do get a glimpse of the serial killer in that scene. But even if he's just at a bar and he's just mouthing off to the cops or, just ranting about how he's going to bring the whole thing down and do you know who I am? Just being that macho pillar of the community that he put himself out as. Brian Dennehy did awesome. There even is a scene where he smokes pot in front of the police and he's flaunting it, which he did do. The scene where he gives Koslow a bag of lewds and then Koslow, shows the cops, hey, he gave me these. I think in real life it was a joint. I think he shoved a joint in someone's pocket. But on top of being well made and well acted, there are more historical accuracies than there are inaccuracies. And that's what I always look for. So, highly recommend it. If you don't want to buy it off eBay, you can either watch it in one full video or two-part videos on YouTube. It's on there in a few different places, either by itself or in the original two parts. But highly recommend it. Again, don't go into it thinking it's going to be, something like the 2003 film or the 2002 Ted Bundy film where it's all kills. Don't be like a surface level, face value serial killer fan. Learn about the investigation because it is very interesting. And again, he's a top 10 serial killer for me. I'm fascinated by, ones like him, BTK, just pillars of the community, family man, yet committed horrible crimes, many horrible crimes, and was able to get away with it. Which it also sheds light on, about how people have to be missing for so many days before we can do anything about it. His victims being male prostitutes or runaways, so no one really missed them. One thing it did leave out was this young male prostitute named Jeremy, who Gacy picked up, chloroformed several times, raped and tortured several times, and then dumped him off in the park. And then he got involved with the police to try to track him down. That was completely omitted from this film. That would have been an interesting angle. Maybe they left him out because they wanted to show it being more difficult to take this guy down. But, yeah, very good film. Again, another one of those very well-made, made-for-TV movies of serial killers that are usually better than actual Hollywood films. So, probably the best Gacy film you'll get, unless the Netflix Dahmer guy does a Gacy one. But I have many more serial killer films to get to, so stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.